Hello, my friend, and thank you so much for joining me on this wonderful day. It is my birthday month, and so I figured that the next episode of Arthur that we would watch would be some birthday themed ones. So, the very first episode that I thought of watching was the one where Arthur and Muffy have the same birthday or something, and they plan like the same party on the same day or whatever. But I didn't want to do that one. I was thinking like more interesting. So the first episode that we're going to be watching is season 3, episode 14, DW's Perfect Wish. As always, Arthur is breaking the fourth wall in the intro, and he's explaining how great it is to make your own calendars because you can make it any theme that you want it to. And so he's like flipping through, and we get to March, and he's like, oh, yeah, this is like DW's birthday month. Last year, she kept reminding us that her birthday is coming up. So it cuts to this scene where they're at breakfast. DW all of a sudden is like, speaking of birthdays. And Arthur says, who's speaking of birthdays? And she's like, well, nobody. But since we're talking about it now, my birthday is coming up. So Arthur then realizes that today, March 1st, is actually DW's birthday. However, this year is different because she hasn't mentioned to anybody that it's her birthday, which is shocking. Arthur goes to DW's room and he opens the door and he's like, it's your birthday. Like, why are you not excited about your birthday? And she's like, of course I'm excited about my birthday. Can you get the fuck out? Arthur then turns to the camera and says, how is she not excited for her birthday? Insert title sequence. So after the title sequence, the scene continues and Arthur's asking like, why aren't you excited? And DW says, you really want to know? You think you can't handle the truth? But then she is like, okay, fine, I'll explain it. So it all started when I was telling Dad about what kind of birthday cake I want. We cut to the scene. Dad's making a cake. DW says, just so you know, for my birthday, like, I want a normal cake. So real. When the scene came up, I was like, oh, me. I want a normal cake, vanilla cake with vanilla icing. And just in case you're wondering, my only difference is vanilla cake with chocolate icing. Oh my fucking God. Also tuxedo cake. So down. Anything else, hard pass. So then Dad's like, are you sure you don't want to try like my pineapple, coconut, caramel, chocolate surprise cake? And she's like, Zaddy. And he's like, fine. We then cut to another scene where DW and her best friend Emily are playing what I believe is Confuse the Goose outside at a picnic table. DW is talking about how excited she is to turn 5, and Emily says, DW, like, turning 5 is a really big deal. And DW is like, okay, well, yeah, I'm just like really excited because I'm excited. And Emily's like, you're not listening to me. Turning 5 is a big deal. You know what I'm saying? Because you're not a child anymore. You have to go to kindergarten. You have to leave your childish shit behind. You'll never be a little kid ever again. Again, it echoes, again. So then we cut back to DW and Arthur in DW's bedroom, and she's just feeling really melancholic, really depressed. The next words out of her mouth are, and wham, I'm 5. And then she starts to spiral. What if I'm not ready? What if I haven't done all the things that I wanted to do when I was 4? Have I frivoled away my childhood? Literally, she uses the word frivoled, and I've never heard that in my life. But anyway, she's freaking out. Arthur's like, no. And she says, a 3-letter word like no is not going to make me feel better, Arthur. I laughed out loud. At this point, Arthur is trying to make her feel better. And he's like, what did you do in your last 4 years? You fooled the tooth fairy, which I'm pretty sure this was like, she uses like a shark tooth to fool that. I don't even remember what the hell happens. We'll have to cover that at some point. Maybe when I get like my wisdom teeth taken out. You taught us about fire drills. One time you went to the hospital and you got stitches because the Tibble twins are fucking awful. And they swung a swing at her face. DW says, these are the golden memories. A buck, a fire drill, a fat lip. Like, Arthur is fending for his life right now. Like, he's doing his best. He's like, okay, well, you did flips on a balance beam. DW says, I learned that I was not supposed to be on that balance beam at that age. I'm just baby. Then he says, yeah, but okay, well, we went camping and you made that deer friend. DW says, well, I scared the deer and I couldn't take it home. Arthur says, well, Mr. Rogers came over and he was singing to you. DW says, I was sleeping though. Arthur says, yeah, because it was a lullaby. DW says, yeah, but I was sleeping, so I don't remember. Also, another episode that I want to watch is the Mr. Rogers one. Ugh, my God, the early seasons are phenomenal. Arthur responds, okay, you did meet the president, which I'm pretty sure was Bill Clinton, because he's like, oh, hello. I did not do relations with any woman. Oh, hello, little girl. Of course, meeting Bill Clinton meant nothing to DW, as it shouldn't. Okay, sorry. Arthur says, Kate, well, you helped Grandpa Dave make a chicken coop. You went to Crazy Bus Live. You rescued Cousin Lucy's ring at her wedding. You saved the fucking wedding. You got the chicken pox. And you also took great care of Kate when she was born, which is an episode that we watched together. It came full circle. At this point, DW realizes that Arthur is amazing and gives him a hug. And she's like, thank you so much. And Arthur's like, listen, you're my baby sister and I just want you to have a happy birthday. And Arthur says, make sure that you make a good wish. DW's like, I have the perfect wish. Arthur says, you cannot wish for more wishes. It's against the law. DW says, fuck. Okay, fine. I'm going to go ask mom and dad and see what they think. As DW is walking down the stairs, it is absolute darkness. I think we know what might happen here. So she's looking for her mom and dad. She's calling out for them. And then all of a sudden she goes into the kitchen or the dining room. Everybody yells, happy birthday. There is a huge ass cake. Grandma Thora says, make a wish and blow out the candles. DW is like, fuck. And she's just taking so long to figure out what to wish for. It has to be perfect. You don't get this kind of power every day. Her words exactly. DW is now taking suggestions from the peanut gallery. Nothing is working. DW says, maybe I will just wish for a pony. The parents say, do not wish for a pony. That will not come true. At this point, the candle wax is melting all over the cake. Arthur's like, I am not going to eat cake with candle wax all over the damn place. Grandma Thora then goes up to DW and she says, listen, you really don't have to think so hard about what to wish for, because on every year of my birthday, I wish for you and Arthur to just have happiness and everything that you could ever want. Should we all just be Grandma Thora? DW says, so I'm covered wish-wise. Grandma Thora says, yes. So finally, she makes a wish. It's been like 5 minutes. DW says, this is the best normal cake I've ever had. Arthur asks, what did you wish for? DW says, I can't say because it won't come true. Are you new here? Baby Kate, who we know and love, she like throws the cake that she has towards Arthur's face. Arthur dodges it. Everybody's like, oh. Arthur says, what? You thought I was just gonna have cake up in my face? Like, who do you think I am? But then he's like starting to back away and he slips on the cake that's on the floor, spins a couple of times. His face lands on the cake that is on the table. DW starts laughing and she says, that was quick. Arthur says, what you mean that was quick? At this point, we understand that DW wished for Arthur to have cake in his face. To conclude this scene, Pal is licking Arthur's face. And that's that on that. How do I relate to this episode? There was one year, I think it was my 28th birthday. I did not plan anything because like a couple of years ago before that, I had planned to go to karaoke with my friends at the time and a lot of them did not show up. I ended up having to cover a lot of the cost for karaoke. So I was like, you know what, I'm just not gonna plan anything. That ended up being awful. I basically woke up, I dressed nicely, and then I just was staring off into the distance with tears in my eyes. Brendan is like, fuck. And he takes me to this fancy-ish restaurant, which was lovely, just lovely. I guess he told them that it was my birthday, and so they brought out this teapot with tea and a candle sticking out. And I took so long to figure out what to wish for because, like DW says, you don't have this kind of power every day. Maybe we do, but at the time, I didn't think that. I was like, I don't know. At this point in my life, I usually wish for things that are quite vague, and I save like my good wishes for when my eyelashes fall off. And now, back to Arthur. The next episode we'll be watching is season 2, episode 18, DW's Very Bad Mood. Now, there is a scene in this that did go like, not viral, but it circulated the internet a little bit, and I was like, do y'all even know this episode? Because it goes off. It is layered. I am so excited. I love this episode. Okay, so it's a sunny, beautiful day. The camera pans to this random house that looks lovely, but it's not the Arthur house that we know and love. Arthur is dressed up as a lumberjack for some reason. And he's like, you know what? I have the perfect family. I'm so happy right now. The mom comes into the scene dressed up as like a 1950s housewife. And she's like, here's your lunch, Arthur. The dad is like dressed for a wedding. Hey, son, do you want to ride to school? And Arthur's like, golly, that would be great. The doorbell rings. Francine and Brain are at the door and they're like, Arthur, we gotta go to school. So Arthur looks at the camera. He says, my life is perfect, except for one thing. All of a sudden, we hear grumbling in the distance and it's DW, but she's a giant and she just breaks into the house. Everything just crumbles and she's like, where's my breakfast? She sounds like a giant robot. She's just DW, but Transformers, robots in disguise. Everybody's screaming. The town is like in ruins. Everything is on fire for some reason. Insert title sequence. Arthur and DW are at the table eating breakfast. DW is pouring out her corn puffs and she says, these corn puffs are soggy and I want to eat these soggy corn puffs. Why are they soggy? Out of the box, I don't know why. She's going on and on screaming about these corn puffs and how awful her life is. We then cut to the sugar bowl. The sugar bowl is an amazing place. It's a third place. It's fantastic. Arthur is sleeping at the table. Francine is handing out invitations and she's like, you get one, you get one. Arthur, wake up. She's like, I'm inviting you to my birthday. He says, I can't go, I'm too tired. She says, it's not today. You have 2 weeks to get sleep. And he's like, I don't even know if that will happen because DW is driving me up the wall. So we cut to last night. Dad is putting DW to bed, tucking her in, being very gentle, very kind, loving. DW says, you're making me go to bed because you hate me. You wish I wasn't even born. The dad says, well, sleep tight. And I hope that you feel better in the morning. Immediately, DW gets up and she says, I will not feel better in the morning. Slams the door. I won't, slams the door. I won't, slams the door. Arthur says, what if I never sleep again? Brain cuts in and he says, oh, you know what? What if you never sleep again? That is like a really good point because maybe we could make that into an experiment of you not sleeping again and see how. Francine cuts in. Thank God, because Brain read the room and she's like, why don't you just ask her what's wrong? Arthur says, why don't you? Because he's sleep deprived. Francine says, okay. At this point, we are now at Arthur and DW's house. Francine is there. The mom puts down a plate of fries. Immediately, DW grabs a handful, puts her grimy little child hands all over the fries, shoves them in her mouth. Mom says, do one at a time, because fuck. DW goes off. You fucking hate me. I will not do one at a time. Why are you all up in my grill? Leave me alone. I just want to fucking eat. And so then Francine says, DW, can I ask you a question? DW says, maybe. Francine says, what is the matter with you? So emotionally intelligent, oh Francine. DW runs off crying. Arthur says, nice. Francine says, may I be excused? And she leaves. So Francine is now in DW's bedroom where DW is on her bed crying. Francine apologizes and she's like, I'm sorry. That was rude of me, but you're being an ass. DW says, who asked you? You don't even live here. Francine says, I'm just trying to help. DW says, Francine, go. You know what? I'm too tired to even think of anything mean to say. She continues to cry. It's the next day. We're in the cafeteria. Brain asks Arthur if Francine helped at all with DW's mood. Arthur says, no, it made it so much worse. She was slamming so many doors, I thought that she was going to get arrested. And so we cut to this imaginary scene that doesn't actually happen. It's basically like the awful show Cops. They're arresting kids that are crying. They get to the Reed house. Dad's like, upstairs, fucking turn to the right. The cops get into DW's room and they're like, you have the right to remain silent. DW says, I will not remain silent. Who made you rulers of the world? Real. And then the cops are like, we need backup. Cut back to the caf. Binky says, that sounds like a great show. What time is it on? Which channel is it on? Francine says, I think DW's acting up because she's upset about something, and it's up to us to get to the bottom of it. But then Brain and Binky make up this excuse about why they can't help, and Arthur's like, thanks, you guys. Cut to Francine and Arthur in the tree house spying on DW. So Francine's like, okay, what is she doing? Like, give me a play-by-play. Arthur's like, okay, she's eating her sandwich. Oh, she's picking it out of her mouth. She's throwing it on the ground. Pal is eating it. Pal, put that down. And Francine's like, shut up. Arthur's like, I'm so sorry. I just could not watch Pal eat chewed up food. Francine says, oh, give me those. And she's looking and she's like, where did she go? All of a sudden, DW appears and aha! And she says, I know what you're doing and it's not gonna work, so stop. It is now the next day. Arthur and Francine are at DW's school, outside of the school, spying through the hole of a shrub bush. A group of little girls walk in right in front of them and they start talking about birthday plans. And then they run off. Arthur says, oh my God, DW is looking right at us. And Francine says, no, she's not looking at us. She's looking at them. We are now approaching the scene that went semi-viral. So Francine and Arthur walk into the kitchen at the Reed house. DW is sitting on the counter next to her mom, who's mixing something. Francine says, oh, hey, DW. DW says, Francine, can I ask you a question? Francine says, yes. DW says, why don't you go back to your own house and stop bothering us? Mom's like, stop misbehaving. You've been a bad pick-me. Stop it. DW says, okay. I get it. I know. But I know something that will make me feel better, which is seeing crazy cool kittens. Why is it KKK? Do we not see things? Seeing crazy cool kittens in theaters this Saturday. Mom says, you've seen that movie twice. Francine says, you know what? It's cool. Arthur and I will take her. Arthur has a panic attack because he hates women and he hates everything that women like Beyonce. So they're at the movies. Arthur is sinking in his seat. He's so embarrassed to be here. But then that same group of girls walk in. All of a sudden, DW starts to fake laugh. And Arthur is like, what on earth is happening? And she's like, I'm having so much fun. Then one of the girls says, oh, hey, DW. DW says, oh, hey, Lisa. I didn't know you're gonna be here. I'm just with my besties having a blast. And then the camera starts to zoom out to convey smallness, to convey inferiority, because I'm popular and I usually get invited to birthdays. And Lisa's like, that's nice. Then she goes to her group of friends and they start giggling. DW sees this and she is devastated. The previews begin to start. Arthur says, maybe the previews will be good. DW says, I feel sick to my fucking stomach. We gotta get out of here. Arthur says, we just got here. Wait, what am I talking about? Let's get out. They're walking towards the sugar pool. Arthur says, I just don't understand what's happening. Francine says, you gotta go. DW and I are gonna have some girl time. You're killing the vibe. As Francine and DW are getting ice cream, Francine just gave me her a pep talk about jealousy and how she shouldn't feel bad about not getting invited to whatever party. They get outside and DW starts crying. He's like, Francine, can you help me with something? And Francine's like, anything we want. This is so good. It's this scene of the girls at a party and they're just dancing around the cake. And then a blimp comes into the scene. DW's driving the blimp and she's like, I'm gonna rain on your parade. And then she pulls a lever and then it starts to rain on the birthday. Everything turns black and white. All of the color is washed out because meta, because art. Yes, that scene ends. Francine says that is mean and also a blimp. And then Francine at this point, she's trying to reason with her. She's like, do you and Lisa even hang out? DW says, no. However, she did invite my best friend, Emily. So therefore, I should be invited by proxy. Francine's like, that's not how that works. Not everybody can go to every party. And Francine says, but I do have an idea. The end of this episode basically is that Francine invites DW to her birthday party. And I see. So this is a great episode for so many reasons, but just to start, like, I think that emotional regulation is something that, you know, I have definitely struggled with that. Like, we are conditioned to bury everything. This is not new. It's just so much easier for us to not talk about things because sometimes, like, it just feels so silly to us. You know, I remember like telling my therapist, like,
I just think it's so funny, you know, that of course I was in a car accident when I was a child. Of course. What happened to me?
he's like, that was a trauma response. And I said, oh, and I started crying. Finding that right person to talk to, like, just be like, hey, I just need to like get something off my chest. Like, it feels really silly and like dumb, but I just need to like talk about it. And for that person to be like not judgmental, open. We all need those people in our lives. We need a Francine. Ultimately, it's just like so good, of course, for your mental health, but also for your health. There are countless studies about, you know, the effects on stress on our body. And when we don't address things, it can actually become a pattern, a holding pattern. And at some point, your body will start to scream at you. For example, I myself have experienced trauma, and I had these ways of dealing with it, but it definitely was not serving me. It was definitely like unhealthy ways of dealing with it. I was burying it down. I was ignoring the symptoms until the symptoms like manifested themselves in different ways, like, you know, pelvic floor pain and eczema. So at the end of the day, talk to somebody. Thank you so much for joining me during my birthday month to watch Arthur. Make sure that you subscribe. Also, we have a Patreon if you would like to get to know us a little bit more. We're on TikTok now, and Instagram and all of those places. I'll see you around. Cool. Thank you so much for joining, and I will see you next time. Bye.